In September 2016, we were getting ready to exhibit at the Sustainable Living Expo at the Exhibition Centre in Durban. And I was picking up a box of herbs to place into the car when, as I twisted to go from the picking up to placing in the van, it felt like my back went into a spasm. It was so bad I dropped to the floor. My friend had to pick me up and help me up and then support me as we walked up the stairs back into my house and onto the bed. She gave me pain pills and rubbed me with our Arthritis Relief cream, but it was really bad. So I thought, okay, I'll just rest for the day, and by the next day I should be fine. And I was okay. I was in pain, but could still go and to the exhibition. Before I continue with my story, please can I ask you to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And if you hit the notification bell, you will be notified of when my new videos upload. I'm going to try and upload every Thursday. Let's hope I can keep this. I would like to. And maybe you can help hold me accountable. In March 2017, I was invited by my daughter to go to China where she was working. It was a gift from her to me. She paid for the flight, she paid for the accommodation. It really was an amazing gift. While I was on my way, my back started getting sore. Before this, it hadn't been exactly right since, of course, the September 2016. But I just put it down to my age. I was in my 50s, going through menopause, and I was convinced it had something to do with all of that, just general wear and tear. So by the time I got to China, my back was sore. It was taking me longer to walk. I wasn't as healthy as I should be, but still had a wonderful time. Went on the Wall of China, the whole lot, the Great Wall, and saw a lot of the country, which was really amazing. And it was my first time overseas. I had never been overseas before. On the last night, which was the 11th of April, 10th of April, I was taking a walk from my daughter's flat to her work so that we could go for the final dinner. And as I was walking on the pavement, my toe just stubbed the ground and I stumbled. I did not fall. And as I stumbled, I just felt a pain, a sharp pain in my lower back, and the world went black and then red. And I cried out in pain. Everyone was looking at me, thinking I was very strange. But I was a foreigner in a strange land, so no one really stopped to help. They didn't know what was going on. I eventually made my way to my daughter's work, but couldn't stand, couldn't sit, couldn't do anything. So I was just gently walking up and down. Everyone was trying to get me to settle. And I just said, no, sorry, I'm in pain. I can't sit. But they were very kind. Because it was my last night, I was leaving 8 o'clock the next morning, and this was 8 o'clock at night. I didn't have time to go to the doctor, so we just hopped me up on pain pills and got me onto the plane. The thing is that I needed help. I could hardly walk, and as I was walking, my back would suddenly go into spasm, and the spasm was so bad that I actually couldn't help screaming in pain. It was like, ah! So everyone was looking at me and thinking this woman is strange. But the cabin crew were very, very helpful. And I eventually, after 36 hours, got back to Durban. My family were waiting for me, as well as my friend. And I was in a wheelchair. They had to help me for the last leg of the journey from Dubai. When I got home, my friend said no, she was going to stay with me. She didn't think I would be able to do this alone. So she stayed with me, and thank goodness she did, because by the next morning, I couldn't walk at all. I was screaming in agony, and she called the ambulance. The ambulance people had to fetch me. They had to stabilize me first, put me on a stretcher. They had to give me pills, injections. It was a nightmare. And because of my medical aid, I had to go to Addington, which is a government hospital. When I got there, it took them the whole day before I got my x-ray. So I was left in the emergency room, the ER, and screaming in pain. So they were giving me large amounts of oxygen because they couldn't give me too many pills. And eventually I had the x-ray and they said it was a compressed fracture. They didn't understand why this amount of pain. It was probably osteoporosis. But they found a bed, and by that evening I was on the 4th floor in the orthopedic section of the hospital. It took 12 days for me to be able to walk enough to be able to get out of the hospital. During that time, they said they wanted to do an MRI, but the MRI machine was broken. They wanted to give me a back brace, and they had no back braces. There were none in stock. So eventually my brother and my friend, they just said, that's it. They can't stand seeing me in pain. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. So they went to a different hospital and bought me a back brace. They just took the form from Addington, which said that I needed a back brace and what kind. So they came back with that, and then the physiotherapist at the hospital was able to get me up with the aid of a walker, and I was able to begin my long journey back to healing. I couldn't have done it without the help of friends. Friends and family came every single day. They helped me just with my general feeling better about myself. The one friend brought me lavender every day to just put on my pillow to help me calm down and relax. The other friend, she helped get me up and she washed my hair. For me, I had to stand up in the ward. It was ridiculous. I couldn't get into the shower, couldn't take my clothes off. It was, but they were incredible. And that is one thing I do want to say throughout my story is I could not have done anything without the help of family and friends. You can't do this kind of journey alone. So after a while, at the end of that, they said, okay, well, they can't do an MRI. So the best they can do is send me to the spine clinic, which was at King Dinizulu Hospital. And I eventually got an appointment on May of 2017. The doctor he was an orthopedic surgeon as well. He didn't even get out of the chair. I was in a wheelchair. He asked me if I could feel my legs. He asked me to lift my feet, up and down. And that wasn't the problem. The problem was my back, not my legs. And he said, well, there's nothing he can do. I need an MRI. So I said, well, the MRI machine at Addington is broken. He said, well, too bad. You have to get an MRI. I won't do anything until then. So we went back to Addington to try and get an appointment to eventually get an MRI. And they said, yes, they could do it by June 2018. First of all, it was February 2019, which at that stage would have been almost 2 years. And then they brought it to June 2018, which was a whole year. I was already struggling to walk. I couldn't stand for longer than, I couldn't be up for longer than 4 hours without my legs just giving in. So it was a very trying time. I went to physiotherapy. My GP said it was probably osteoporosis. They sent me for a bone density scan. The bone density scan said I had osteopenia, which shouldn't have caused a break like that. But they said, it's a compressed fracture. It shouldn't be causing as much pain as it is. But they didn't do anything else. So the physiotherapist was really good. She helped me with pain relief as much as she could. By the end, she thought maybe it was more psychological, and I had just become dependent on the back brace and on everything else. I was with walking sticks at that stage, so I can't quite remember. So eventually they sent me in January 2018 for another x-ray. And the compressed fracture, which had been at the L3, which is the lower part of the back, the lumbar vertebra. The L3 is kind of like closer to the middle, I suppose you could say, of the lower back. And this vertebra had now collapsed totally. And the GP got quite a fright, and she says, look, you have to see a surgeon. But of course, it's not going to happen in the government hospitals. You're just going to have to go to a private hospital. And she made an appointment with a Dr. Coleman. The medical aid said they would pay part of it. It really was a struggle because financially I wasn't working properly. My husband was already passed on, and the finances were a problem anyway. So I had to dig into savings. It was just a mess, but a mess that had to be done. He looked at the x-ray and he said, it looks like I have fallen from a 10-story building. That kind of collapse would only happen with that kind of trauma. So he said I had to go for an MRI. Thank goodness that was paid for by the medical aid. And where they wouldn't pay for it before, now suddenly they would pay for it. When it came back, it showed that I did have a tumor attached to my spinal column at the L3. And I would need an operation to remove that vertebra totally and for them to put a cage in its place. A cage, it was like a plastic cage. I do have a picture, but I'm not going to put it up here. If anyone wants to see it, they can. And it was called a lumbar corpectomy, L3 corpectomy, and anterior spinal infusion, because they had to put then a brace onto the L4 and the L2 to hold that cage in place. It used up my entire pension that I had saved so far, which was over 100,000. Again, I'm talking money here because finances do come into it. When you get a diagnosis of cancer or any other major medical, it costs money. And it's something that we have to take into account and not just be so blasé when we think, well, we've got a good medical aid. That doesn't mean it's easy for everyone. Just something that has made me far more conscious. Anyway, they after the operation, they sent the tumor away for analysis, and it came back that I definitely had multiple myeloma, and that the tumor was a myeloma tumor. So it's a tumor. Multiple myeloma is a blood and bone marrow disease, and so it means that the bone marrow is not producing red blood cells, or the white blood cells are crowding out the red blood cells, and what my body is being told is to break down bone but not to rebuild it. And it only happens in certain places where the bone marrow is leaking out. I get very confused with it, but that's basically what it is. There's a lot of information online, and I will be going more into it in a different video, but this really is just the story up to date. So I was told I had to go to an oncologist. The oncologist said no, because it's multiple myeloma, it's a hematologist. So I had an appointment for May 2018 for the hematologist. I had to get better from the operation first. In the meantime, my friend Christine and we did a lot of research on the multiple myeloma, trying to find out what causes it, where it comes from, what is done about it, where do we find information. And we found out that it's something that cannot be cured. It is something that even with medical intervention will eventually come back, and it's never truly gone. So we had to keep that in mind the whole time. So when I went another thing I did was speak with a friend who has lived with cancer for over 20 years. And she said to me, Sue, whatever you do, don't rush into a decision. They've only discovered it now, but it means that you've had this cancer for a while in your body already. So to wait a little while longer as you just do a bit more research and get your mind into a place where you know what you want, don't rush into anything. So it was the best advice I could have been given. It helped give me time to really focus on my health, what I could do, what was possible, and to get used to the idea that I would be living with a chronic condition. You know, they say, look, it's a cancer, it will kill you. And yes, cancers kill. This is true. But there's ways of doing it differently. So when I say anyway, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So the hematologist said that I would need a bone marrow test, as well as that would be followed by chemotherapy and a bone marrow transplant. When I said I needed time to think, he said, well, fine. And when I phoned and asked him if he would just do a blood test, just so that I could see where my M protein band is, which is the multiple myeloma protein, he said no, he would not do anything. I was only to follow what he had told me he would do for me. Otherwise, he wasn't interested. So I got hold of my GP and asked her if she would do a blood test. She said absolutely not. I had to go and do what the hematologist said. I phoned another GP who said absolutely not. The hematologist was one of the best in the country, and he knew best, and if I didn't follow his advice, I would die. Well, all of this, just instead of it making me afraid, it made me angry. So angry, because I felt unheard, I felt unconsidered, that they wouldn't even explain stuff. They gave me a book and said, read the book. Read the book, it'll tell you everything you need to know. So yes, by this stage I was now angry and very stubborn. And I thought, no, I need to talk to more people, I need to do more research. So I didn't at that stage have the bone marrow test, which I probably should have, but I was getting over the shock of the past year and a half of just living with so much pain and going through a traumatic surgery. I just wanted to give my body a break. So eventually I went to a homeopath who said he would kind of consolidate what I'd had from everyone, because by that stage I'd talked to my herbalist, I'd spoken to a nutritionist, a medical nutritionist, who'd given me a lot of advice. And so the homeopath said, okay, he would consolidate all my information and he would get the blood test done. He did research on what blood tests to do, and he became a partner in my process. I felt so confident and so relaxed with him. It was wonderful. Then in January 2020, I had another break in my upper back, my thoracic vertebra, one of those compressed. And I was sent to Umhlanga Hospital by ambulance, and there the hematologist did a bone marrow test. The bone marrow test said I had a monoclonal gammopathy of indeterminate significance, and it was an LGC. I've got it written down, so I can tell you that. I might write it in the notes below. And when we looked that up, it was MGUS, is like the shortened version of it. And the treatment by most doctors is there's nothing to treat. It will eventually go into my multiple myeloma, but at the moment there's nothing to treat. So I went with this information when I spoke with the hematologist, and I said, okay, you've told me this, I've seen the results. So, is there anything you can do to help me strengthen my bones, maybe a bone strengthener? And he said, absolutely not. Your bones are breaking. You need the chemotherapy. You need the bone marrow transplant. If you don't do as I say, you're going to be dead in 2 years. If you do as I say, you've got a 5 to 10 year life expectancy. And I said, well, I've already lived for more than 2 years with this, so I don't believe you. So I'm going to have to go away again and just carry on doing what I'm doing. But thank you. Lockdown happened, of course, soon after that. And during lockdown in June of 2020, my cervical vertebra, 2 of them compressed, the C5 and the C3. So again, into an ambulance, off to hospital. This time the medical aide said, sorry, you're not getting authorization. You'll have to pay it all up in advance. I've got no more money left, so that wasn't going to happen. So I said to the orthopedic guy, He was the neurosurgeon, the neurosurgeon. I said, listen, please just give me a neck brace. I'll go to my mom. I'll just recuperate, but I need a neck brace. So they gave me a hard neck brace, which I still wear every time my neck gives me trouble. And I went to my mom and did some recuperation there. This was a very difficult time, an extremely difficult time, because it was lockdown. It was, it was just, well, we all know, we all went through it, right? But it came to the place where after the break, I said, no, listen, I need the bone strengthener, the biphosphonate. The biphosphonate, I had found out, all it does is it makes your bones brittle, so there's still the chance of them breaking. But if I went on to chemo, the bones would be destroyed even more and they would break even more. So I was in a bit of a catch-22. But with the chemo, my immune system would be compromised, my bones would be weakened, and then they would still have to kill the bone marrow off totally in order to give me a new bone marrow, it's a transplant. And it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. I spoke with people, and they all agreed it doesn't make sense. But maybe you should just follow the advice and have the chemo. But I had to go with my gut instinct, and yeah, it really was my gut instinct. It was just, that doesn't feel right. My body's already being destroyed. It's already breaking down. Why must I now destroy it more? And maybe it would work for a couple of years, because I said to the hematologist, so what would happen? I have the chemo, I have the bone marrow transplant. What then? He says, well, you would have to, it comes back and then you have to go through the process again. And in between that, you just have management. So I said to him, okay, fine. What is the cost? Because I have to think of costs here. And he said, well, the two together, and he could only give me, of course, a ballpark figure, naturally, which was fine. But he says the chemo is probably about 250,000, and then the bone marrow transplant about 500,000. So that's 750,000. My house is worth just over $1 million. I would have to sell my house. So any income that I have through the Airbnb, I won't have anymore. Any income from the herbs, I wouldn't have anymore, because I wouldn't be able to work on it, because I would be having chemo, right, with no money, with nothing to be able to sustain me. And then I said, and then I'd have to go through the process again, and I would die anyway, because I don't have that money to do it again. And he just kind of shrugged and said, well, that's your options. You just have to do what you can do. So I said, yes, I do have to do what I can do. And I choose to go to my medical aid and to say to them, look, I need a bone strengthener because my bones keep breaking. The hematologist is not doing it. And then they said, oh, but if you're going to a hematologist, you need one on our program. And this particular hematologist isn't on our program. So I said, okay, can I have a list of people who are? And I went through the list, and it was an oncologist who I had had very good feedback about. Of course, he's an oncologist, so he wants people to do as they should be doing, according to cancer doctors. But at the same time, he was respectful of what I wanted. And he says, no, if he can look after my bloods and keep a check on them, and then I could have the bone strengthener drip every month to begin with, and then we went to every second month, and now we're going to every third month. And that is just so that we don't overdo it where I then lose my jawbone. So, I've had to do interventions. I've had to do medical treatments. That's why I'm saying there's no one size fits all. There is no such thing as what I do in my journey, my healing journey. You have to do it in your healing journey. There is no way I would ever say that, because each of us is individual, and we have to feel comfortable with the decisions we make. What I am here to tell you is that the decisions I made, I would make them again. This is all I could fit into this video. The pain, the trauma, the understanding of my disease, it does take its toll. And I thank you. If you've made it to the end of this video, I thank you for being here from the bottom of my heart. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.